Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to do another video on conscious creation, just riffing through some insights that I had, some prior insights, and we'll just see where it goes. I have no plan for this video other than to just like whatever points emerge are going to emerge out of induction or from the insights themselves. The ones that I'm dumping, right? I'm not feeling them, right? So my intuition is saying no. See, when you're performing, you really flesh out what's real because you're more cautious when you're performing. So that's the difference between practicing and performing. When you're practicing, you're writing everything down. But when you're performing, you're thinking of your audience in mind. You know, this human versus divine dichotomy is actually starting to annoy me. Like, because this issue of like, is the devil human or is it divine? Is truth human or is it divine? I mean, these are just labels, right? I mean, obviously your ethics is going to hinge on your metaphysics and your epistemology. So what you think is evil hinges on some level as to what your philosophy is. But also not too. I mean, if somebody walks up to you and punches you in the face, you're probably not going to have a very hard time just for no reason, right? You're just walking down the street, somebody comes up to you and punches you in the face. It's not going to be a very long inference to decide that that was an evil act, even if it was totally like that person is just nuts or whatever. Okay, the shadow of spirituality. I think the shadow of spirituality is the metaphysics of individual self-help. Oftentimes I've realized that, and it's not always the case, everybody's probably going to get offended in something in this video. Spirituality can be a glorious bypassing of the metaphysics of individual improvement. When you start talking about God, you start talking about truth, you start, doing psychedelics, that kind of thing. That has its place on the path. But it also can be a very convenient spiritual bypass to getting your life together, getting your finances together, getting your relationships together, getting your health together. Tested on the road versus made in the studio. Tested on the road reminds me of like bands that, they primarily played their music on the road. Made in the studio means, you did a bunch of drugs, you went into a studio, you started messing around with technology, and you blended things together that way. Is one of these better than the other in terms of music making? No, they're just different. Perfecting on the road means, though, that primarily you play live as a musician. Perfecting in the studio means you're kind of a nerd in his mother's basement, like messing around with gadgets, right? No, that's a joke in part. Lack of knowledge causes suffering. But I think the Dunning-Kruger effect also holds true. Like thinking you have too much knowledge also causes suffering. I see this a lot with people who they claim to have the truth or to know God or these kinds of lofty things. They claim to have like the one right understanding of things. That causes suffering, right? Because that's lack of knowledge causes suffering, but too much knowledge causes suffering too, because that ain't knowledge. That's just your opinion. But you just double down on that, right? So you think it's knowledge, but other people look at that and they go, that ain't my knowledge. Do you ever feel sometimes that you're being used by the collective? This is kind of a teleological thing. I talked about this in my intro video to Stage Emerald, which is one of my extended spiral stages. But this issue of teleology is actually really interesting. Like, why are you here? Why am I inclined to make these videos? Because I decided to make the video? Or because the universe decided to make the video? What's the relationship between me and the whole? Is there a moral relationship between me and the whole? Is the whole using me to communicate something to me or the other? Is wisdom superior to knowledge? What is wisdom? What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? I think wisdom has to do with like intuitive judgment. Knowledge is more specific statements about matters of fact or states of events in the world or the condition of the world. Wisdom is about judgment. It has an intuitive kind of moral component to it that knowledge doesn't always have, although we can have knowledge about morals. Is reason a relation between ideas and experience? This is kind of Spinoza's account of reason. Is that reason tracks the logos of God's will. So you can think of one thing following another and being able to pull out the reason from the sense experience is a way of using thought to track the will of God. For in Spinoza, that would be nature or the whole. What do we make of when we couldn't do what we wanted to do? Like, is this a personal failing? Or is this just like you're not accepting your life for what it is? The tragedy of your life just can't be helped. Is there kind of a paradox here? If you think about it, a paradox is very feminine because you're linking two contradictory statements together. So you're taking the link over the node. The node would be that the contradiction has to be resolved into a singular statement. That is more true than the paradox. See, that's the masculine trying to reduce the link to the node. The feminine, though, wants to reduce the node to the link. So somebody famously asked Derrida, what is love? And Derrida said, I can't answer, what is love without considering how love links up with all of the other terms like hate and so on. To ask Derrida what is love, he thought that was a ridiculous question because he's valuing the link over the node. Notice this, that whatever you value, it's frustrating not to work on it or when you're prevented from working on it. Just make sure you don't blame the world for that. Like, take responsibility. Look at what you promised to do and how often you don't do what you promised to do. And also, we might think of reason as law, like I just discussed, and reason as ideal. So reason could be like right intention, right view. Like we have a goal. And reason tells us what the goal is. But oftentimes I find that people will mistake the ideal for the actual. No, it's like your goals are very different from what you do. Like, I'm glad that you have goals, but, we can look at what you do, and it is what it is. It's one thing to know, it's another thing to apply. How about this one? Asking for more service than is reasonable. Or asking more from reality. Like having this kind of entitlement mentality regarding reality. Well, it's like, why don't you ask yourself first for service that is... Why don't you ask yourself for more service than is reasonable? Right? See, it's easy to demand, but place that demand on yourself first. Do you like the way that feels? Does that motivate you? Knowing versus not knowing. Man, this is a paradox, a beautiful paradox, actually. Beautiful feminine paradox. Knowing versus and not knowing. So versus is called an exclusive or. That's the masculine. It's got to be one or the other. Knowing and not knowing is the feminine. It's valuing the link. It's both. Knowing and not knowing. The full cup and the empty cup. And there are a lot of people, especially masculine-minded people, who don't like this kind of thought, right? They can't hold a paradox of two contradictory things and allow that paradox to be a thing, even though it's a link. See, that's a higher level of masculinity. It's more on divine marriage. I'll make a video on divine marriage. My theory of stage teal has three components: the marriage between the human and the divine marriage, and the integral. So I've made a video on the first one. I still got to make a video on the latter two. Teal is one of my extended spiral stages. Your addiction to popularity is your downfall. You took yourself too seriously. You know what? I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to me too. Like, one of the biggest bypasses in doing individual self-help work is anointing yourself to be a teacher as a way of thinking that you're progressing in individual self-help. Is reality entirely mental? That sounds pretty masculine to me. How about this one? Idealism of mind meets what is actually manifested. So this is really the paradox between imagination and manifestation, or imagination or magic. Notice that magic comes out of imagination, versus manifested, embodiment, body. So idealism is a form of magic. Concepts are a form of magic, right? But actuality or being is what's here right now. And notice there is a distinction between fantasy and actuality. In the masculine, there's two types. There's a masculine version of fantasy, which is conceptualization. The feminine version of fantasy is imagination, visual imagination, daydreaming. But both of those are a form of fantasy. And actually, fantasy is not bad. Fantasy is here, so why are we labeling it bad or untrue? If it's here, how can it be untrue? Perspective awareness is a key thing in self-help. Everything is perspectival on some level. Stage yellow understands ego systemically. The self, is the self truth, an archetype, or a pointer? What is the self? Is the self some kind of, what is the self, right? And even if we say that the self is something, does that capture it? Like, are you a self without realizing that you understand the self? The story of self. What does the story of self have to do with self? Answers versus and embodiment. Answers. Somebody claims to have all the answers, right? Well, you can be pretty sure that person's dealing in power, even if they call it truth. Because here's the thing. Here's a test for you. If you have all the answers, then prove that you can do individual personal development better than anybody else. Because if you had the truth, presumably you'd be able to apply it to your life and actually embody in ways that are remarkable. So I'm kind of bugged by like power that arises from weakness, power that comes from the imagination. Like you want to win, but you don't really want to. You don't want to play the game and win at the game. You want to sort of invent your own game and then declare yourself to be the winner that way. There's pros and cons to not be able to see or hear so good. Oh my God, isn't this true? I mean, with all the stuff now going on in politics, like I wish I just didn't see and hear so good sometimes. I'm just like, like life is already a torment on some level, and to have all this crap happening in the media now is just, I mean, it's awful. The focused mind versus the unfocused mind. The focused mind versus the unfocused mind. Recently, I did a psychedelic where I had a strong realization that confusion is okay to be here. The like almost like stage beige in a way, or the feminine, not knowing, the divine feminine in a way. That's okay to be. That's just as much a feature of being here as knowing. Like knowing is a state. See, the masculine wants to say, no, knowing is truth, right? No, that your truth is a state. You're a state. Reality versus and idealism, a disjointed path. On some level, you don't know what or who you are. And that's okay. So you can't deal with that, right? Because you got to have all the answers. You got to be the authority. But see, that just keeps you with the full cup. When you open up and have an empty cup, then new energies actually start to evolve and emerge within you. Your feelings start to give you a lot of guidance. Thoughts are fine, but oftentimes thoughts put you in a fantasy world. Yeah, it's fine to have fantasies, but don't pretend like your fantasies are truth necessarily. I mean, they're here, so in that sense they're truth, but they're truth on some level, but not the entire truth. The big versus small duality. You ever had somebody tell you you just think too small or you just feel too small? Well, the feminine is the small. The masculine is the big. So it's the big versus small dichotomy. I mean, like, again, when I did that psychedelic, I had a distinct understanding, like, that it's okay to be small. It's okay to think small. It's okay to be big. It's okay to think big. So this big versus small duality is actually like really actually fascinating. That might be what I title this video around. And notice like how morality shapes what we're hostile to. Like, so we feel like the not good is fair game to attack. So what do? We create a metaphysics and epistemology that sets up an ethic, that sets up a good versus evil dichotomy. And then the evil people are like fair game to attack. Because it's easier to loot and fight the enemy than it is to, right, hurt something that you're attached to. Is it bad to make up a spirituality? Like somebody might say something along the lines like, I'm descended from royalty or something like that, or, I'm God or something like that. I mean, like, why did you make up that spirituality? Did you make up that spirituality because you wanted to feel better? Because you wanted to have something over other people, right? Like you want to lord this truth over other people. That way it makes you important, right? It makes you special, gives you credibility. But what does this have to do with like the metaphysics of individual improvement? Notice that intuition is kind of like an internal grounding wire. Some people do make an ideology about being open-minded, but these people are often what I call flying monkeys for like a source of power. Because you cannot be a leader and be entirely open-minded. I don't care who you are. Power, individual power, requires being an asshole. Otherwise, you can't enforce boundaries. So if you're somebody who's very feminine and you're linking yourself up with a powerful person and you're kind of taking the second seat in life, well, you're kind of coasting on the coattails of that person. Not entirely, but I'm just saying, like, if you really want to be a leader, the masculine, as the individual leader, it does require the power of one. The power of one. I'm the boss, right? Stage orange. From the human level, stage orange, and then stage coral from like a divine level. Stage coral is one of my extended spiral stages. Is consciousness truth or a trap on the path, or both? You wonder, like, all these people who spend all this time discussing spirituality on a spirituality forum, why are they choosing to live that kind of life instead of just doing personal development for their own life? What is it about, like, talking about self-help or spirituality that is so attractive to us? And I'm not saying it's entirely bad. How about talking around something versus personally knowing something? Like, you notice that, like, some people, they have a very keen direct experience that they can talk about, and they know a lot about that one thing. Then there's other people, it's like they're trying to probe it, but like from afar. They're trying to get at it, they're circling the wagons, and they're like taking notes, and they're kind of trying to figure it out. But you realize, like, somebody who knows that area better than that person looks at that person and goes, that's not as good, dude. You know what I mean? Like, you're the things that you know about, when you talk about those things, you're dead on. But the things that you don't know about, that you pretend to know about, and you're kind of talking around those, it might sound good superficially, but somebody who actually has direct knowledge in that area, or a lot of experience in that area, can tell the difference. The pros and cons of general thinking. Oh man, like, my people have been persecuted, right? My people is a general thought. My people have been persecuted. right? You ever think about how you persecute yourself or how you persecute other people? So you're identifying with a group, but a group is already, a level of abstraction. It could very well be that your people have been persecuted, but I'm just saying, the way that stage green clings to this, man, is kind of, because it's feminine. Green is feminine, so it's focused on the tribe. We as, a community of loving individuals are not these other devils out there that want to hurt our community. So when I was doing that, when I had that psychedelic experience, I had a distinct awakening, really, that I don't know. I lost the idea. That's very feminine. I lost the idea. You ever had that happen to you? You just lost the idea, and you're like, "Oh, that's fine." I mean, you feel like a loser, right? You feel small. But again, that's the feminine, small. Being small is okay. Losing the idea is okay. Being imperfect is okay. The value is in the process as much as it is in the result. Look, your life is going regardless of what you're doing. You got to enjoy the process, even through the ups and downs, especially through the downs. You ever feel like you're just in hell? You are for a time, right? You're not always in joy, right? There seems in the human, you're switching back and forth between heaven and hell. To what extent is it okay to validate your reality? Can you literally just make something up and then just say this is the truth, and is that okay? To relate with other people with that kind of mentality? Or how about this? Is it okay to take your own subjective experience first before considering anything else? So in other words, my subjective experience is king. Are there pros and cons to that? Meaning, you got to talk to me. You can't talk at me, right? You got to talk to me, right? If you want to talk to me, then we can have a conversation. But it's got to be coming from that kind of approach. If not, for me, it's just just another blog post online or something. So there's a dichotomy between sensitivity and callousness, ego and no ego. You ever thought that maybe you're in some kind of a spiritual fantasy world, some kind of drugged out facsimile of life almost, or maybe not, right? I'm being a little provocative here. How about this one? Don't know and don't want to know. It's fuck your truth, right? Your truth is not the truth. And truth also includes the fact that I don't know. So there you have it. What about direct experience in spirituality? People tend to say, well, direct experience. Well, what the hell does that mean? That's about as vague as consciousness, right? Or truth. What are spiritual truthers trying to achieve? How do we overcome need to be right mindset? Does need to be right do your push-ups for you? When we talk about energy, hope is energetic in a way. Hope, though, in part, is fantasy. Because it's hope for the future. It's hope for something that hasn't happened yet. So fantasy isn't entirely bad. You don't really want to make a dichotomy between truth and magic entirely. Yeah, so truth versus and magic. or the imagination. Yeah, the big and the general can be inspirational. So this is masculine version of magic. The big, the general. Feminine is about the small, the particular, the link. Yeah, magic can provide motivation. The imagination can provide motivation. Truth can be problematic. Your truth versus my truth. And notice this, that worldview doesn't dictate what you do. You could have like some incredible worldview, but be homeless on the street, right? Worldview can be a fantasy. Do I have to give up on spirituality to do practical self-help? I think the answer to that is obviously not. So, in summary, there's a dichotomy between truth versus and no truth, and small versus and big. And I want to say that the deeper truth is that your experience of all of this is constant. And it's only in the now. And there's a dichotomy between accepting the way your character shows up versus the metaphysics of individual improvement, which is using the masculine imagination to create goals, using language to create ideals. But be careful that when you fill your cup that way with fantasy, whether it's masculine or feminine, you start to loop on that. And that becomes your movie, right? Instead of just sitting here with no mind. Well, that's another way to experience the movie. The question is, though, can you optimize the movie while still having a spiritual perspective for yourself first? And I want to say that I think you can. But it's difficult. It's not a linear process. And there's definitely ups and downs, starts and stops to it. But I think it's important to not give up hope. Just keep doing the work, and eventually I think the benefits will start to emerge. What you work on is what you will improve ultimately. But your dream character needs to take the action. I mean, life doesn't just deliver good things to people on a silver platter usually. And if it does, it doesn't last forever. It goes away and then that person is fucked. Right? It's the person who can create their own silver platter that even if they get knocked down, they can get right back up and start over. It's like, when you die in Minecraft, you lose all your stuff. You just start over. You know how to start. You did it once, right? You can do it again. It's a pain in the ass, but you can start over and you can do it. But imagine being somebody who they don't do anything. They don't even die in Minecraft. They don't take any kind of a risk. And good things might happen to them. I mean, they might stumble upon some loot or something like that, take that, and might be able to live high on the hog for a little while. But then, because of the fact that you're not working on your life, you're going to go through deep disappointments too. Okay, friends? Hopefully this was a good video. All improvised. So I'll talk to you soon. Take care.